So, Alex, we want to take you back, if we can, to your time in Toronto. This weekend, Jose Bautista will be honored on the level of excellence for the Blue Jays, and deservedly so. I want to go back to 2008 when he was acquired, and you were the assistant general manager then. I mean, it wasn't like Bautista was a known commodity then. It wasn't like he'd, knocked the ball out of the park a lot. What was it that you guys saw in him, and who was it that stepped up and said, we should get this guy?
Yeah, so, I mean, look, at the end of the day, J.P. Ricciardi was the GM, and he ultimately had the final say on pursuing guys, trading for guys, and all that kind of stuff. So it definitely it ends with him in terms of making those determinations. And we had seen him a ton in spring training because the Pirates had spring training and still do in Bradenton, Florida. We played them a bunch. So JP had seen Jose Bautista a ton. I had seen him a ton. But what happened, we had acquired Scott Rowland for that year. He had gotten hurt. He had missed time with the shoulder, and we just didn't have depth. And once this is after the trade deadline, Jose had been sent down to the minor leagues. The Pirates trade waivers at the time, and I think he had made some money, not a ton, but he was arbitration eligible and so on. And I remember I got the waivers each day, and his name came up, and I thought, wow, that'd be a pretty good claim for us. Not as a guy that was going to become a star, just as a bench player, could fill in for Scott Rowland at third base. We'd seen him a lot, had a lot of familiarity. He'd play a lot of positions and so on. And he was just good depth and protection for us. So I called Tony LaCava, the other assistant GM at the time, and I said, hey, what do you think about claiming claiming Jose Bautista on trade waivers, seeing if we can get something done and so on. And he said, yeah, I think it's a good idea. So, basically wanted to check myself before I went to J.P. Ricciardi with the idea. If it was a dumb idea, he would have told me. He's like, no, I think that makes sense. And so I went to JP and I said, look, I think we should do this. Here's why. He could have shot it down and said no. Instead, he said, you know what, which he was great with this. He gave me a lot of rope and autonomy and really allowed me to grow and do a lot of things like contracts and so on. He said, you know what, I totally agree. Why don't you contact the Pirates, put in the claim, and try to get a deal done with them. So we got the claim. I negotiated with their AGM at the time. Ultimately went to JP. The ask was Robinson Diaz, which I thought made sense, and JP agreed, and he gave me the go-ahead to get the deal done. And from there, we had him, and he had a nice little run for us, and I think he led our team in home runs when we got him. We had not have any power that year. And then 2009, we were ready to cut the cord on him. He wasn't playing well. Alex Rios gets claimed by the White Sox. He gets an opportunity to play the last month. Goes off. I think it's 9 home runs in September. The following year, Cito leads him off because we didn't have anybody else. And he has a huge year, and we sign him, and he has a great run.
Amazing.
Yeah, that 2010 season, that's when he hit 54. Like 54 home runs. We had him on yesterday. I remember asking him, I asked him, do you remember any slumps? How can you be slumping if you hit 54? And his thought was, well, I only hit, I think, 260 average, and I struck out a lot. So there were times where I actually wasn't that happy with production. But 54 home runs, franchise record. I'm not sure who's going to touch that anytime soon. And then afterwards, you mentioned it. You signed him long-term. You signed him that 5-year deal, $65 million total. Which I remember, I think I interviewed you after that, Alex, and I remember you kind of saying, hey, this is still a gamble for us, even though this guy just hit 54, because it's not like he has 5 years of data behind him. It turned out to be a remarkable team-friendly contract, and I got the sense it was a sensitive topic for Jose because he left money on the table based on how well he played over those 5 years. Did that ever come up? Over the next 5 years after he signed that deal and he continued to explode offensively, did the contract ever come up between the two of you?
No, it didn't at all. And I think, it's all about the timing of when you do the deal, right? Look, obviously, he had, after we did the deal, I think 2 or 3 days after, I remember driving to the ballpark in spring training and thinking, did we make a mistake? Because we were getting ripped pretty good. Satellite radio, MLB channel was killing us. And my assistants were telling me, man, you were getting crushed on the radio today.
Oh, good.
I had some other execs and agents I talked to after the fact, that I had relationships with, but basically said, are you nuts? crazy. The guy's 29 or 30 years old, and he hadn't done it before. And I can even tell you, obviously, Rogers signed off on it, and Paul Beeston ultimately signed off on it. But I think even there was so much criticism about the deal that I even remember, getting asked about it a few days after, like, well, did we go too high? Was this too much? And so on. And look, I guess I'd say this: is when you look at the timing of that deal and the free agent deals that had been signed, I believe Adam Dunn signed with the White Sox. Dan Uggla had done an extension with the Braves. I think Victor Martinez did a deal with Detroit, and those were all in the $12 to $13 to $14 million a year range. And then the high deal of that was Adrian Beltre, who was on his way to the Hall of Fame and came off an incredible year with the Boston Red Sox. And he signed a deal with the Rangers for $16 million a year, and he was a pure free agent. So we basically gave Jose Adrian Beltre type money, and he was a year away from free agency. There was still a ton of risk, and that was at the top of the charts at that point too. So look, 4 years later, 3 years later, he becomes the greatest star in the game. I don't think anyone would have expected that, but the deal that he got at that time was very much in line with the top free agents.
So in light of that, Alex, when you think back on that, what do you learn from that experience going forward? Like, what does that instruct you, into where you are now?
I think, we were nervous doing the deal because, look, he hadn't done it before. He did it for a year. But ultimately, the analysis that we did on it was we were betting on the guy. We believed in the swing changes. The on-base skills were always very good. He had a very good eye to play. He walked a lot. So we definitely believed that. We believed he would age well, even though we didn't love giving him a fifth year. And we had concerns there, but that's what it took to get the deal done. And, but I think at the end of the day, there was just enough. It wasn't that complicated. I can tell you that, from that, it's kind of instructed me a little bit when we've done deals in Atlanta. Now, granted, guys we did them young, but whether it's in Acuna or so on, the highest guarantee in the history of the game for a guy with less than 1 year service when we did the Acuna deal was, I believe, Eloy Jimenez with the White Sox at $43 million. We guaranteed Acuna $100 million at that time. That being said, we were betting on the person. I had never seen anything like that before. I'd seen Corey Seager and Cody Bellinger in L.A. come up and emerge as great players, but I hadn't seen anybody like Acuna. Same thing with Strider or Harris. Those guys, we gave them deals that hadn't been done before, but I just hadn't seen anything like that before. And we knew they had great makeup, work ethic, and so on. And I think, look, they're not always going to make sense. Guys get hurt. Guys don't perform. The game is hard. But I think if you keep it simple, now you're always going to evaluate the talent, but you're betting on the human being, you should, for the most part, be okay.